So just to introduce our guests today, we have Jamie Bartley from Unyte Hemp. And Jamie has also informed me he is starting a new operation called Save UK CBD. Oh, sorry, Patrick, apologies. Patrick Gilbert, everybody, my apologies. From Hempen as well. Thank you. We have Colin Morgan from the ADAS, that's correct. And Rebekah Shaman from the BHA, the British Hemp Association. Thank you. So what we're going to be discussing today is around hemp farming and agriculture. So each of the panelists will have a little discussion, and then we'll have a Q&A on the subject. So what I'm going to do is we'll start off with you, Rebekah, if that's okay. We'll just pass the mic as we go along. So basically, this is just a general discussion about hemp farming.
What do you want me to talk about? Okay. Okay, so I founded the British Hemp Association, and I was working with Hempen as a consultant, and I was seeing what was happening in the rest of the world. In 2014, the restrictions in America were being removed, so you could get a hemp research license. Also, that was happening in Canada and in other areas. And what we're seeing is a removal of the barriers to growth of the hemp industry. In 2018, the Hemp Farm Bill was passed, which means that in America they are moving ahead with utilizing hemp not only as an agricultural crop, an environmental crop, but also as an industrial crop. And Britain was built basically on the hemp industry in the 15th and 16th, 17th century. The Navy was built from hemp, and Britain was a real player in the hemp market. And what we're seeing is that a return to a need for sustainable materials that don't cost the earth. We're heading into an environmental crisis with plastics, with materials that don't biodegrade. And so there's a need for some vital solutions, and hemp really is one of those solutions. But since 1961 convention, UN Convention on Drugs and the 1971 Misuse of Drugs Act in the UK, we've seen hemp being demonized as a drug, and therefore now is shrouded in political controversy. So it's no longer recognized as the industrial agricultural crop that it has always been. And unless we remove these barriers to growth as soon as possible, we will start seeing a huge inflood in imports on agricultural and sustainable products in the UK without having an opportunity to flourish, for UK hemp to flourish with our farmers, and to have an industry that can help support local communities. So I founded the BHA in order to lobby to remove the barriers to growth, to take hemp out of the controlled Home Office license and to bring it back into DEFRA so that it can become an agricultural crop and so we have an opportunity to really grow the hemp industry here in the UK.
Thanks so much. Good morning, everybody. It's quite fascinating being up here after Danny did a sex presentation. So now we had sex, now we've got farming. Basically, I'm from an organisation called ADAS, and ADAS is a very well-established agricultural services business. It was actually set up by DEFRA, Ministry of Agriculture about then, after the war, to feed the nation. And we last year did a little piece of research where we launched some web pages about the cannabis sector and said we could help, particularly because we're all about research and consultancy in agriculture. And it was quite fascinating because that led us to loads of conversations, particularly with colleagues here on the panel as well. And farmers were inundated us with inquiries about could they grow cannabis in the UK for various purposes. That got us more into detailed conversations about licensing and the flowers and the practices and those kind of things. And we found it very challenging to really help those farmers and the farmers themselves to actually get access to markets and understand what to do. And it's been really interesting, actually, because when you fast forward and start thinking about this more deeply, you can see a situation where we've got a huge number of imports into the UK of CBD oil. And the question that keeps coming back to us at ADAS and farmers is, why can't we grow this stuff here in the UK? Of course, we know the regulatory problems to that. Mike earlier spoke about, how well the crops grow for flower in the UK, and set a challenge to say, could we grow that better in the UK? Could we do variety trials, breed good varieties that grow well here, etc.? And of course, in the UK, we have a significant and world-respected agricultural sector, and we could really utilise that knowledge here in the UK to grow the crops well here. And when you start thinking about Brexit, post-Brexit, you actually say we've got a wonderful opportunity here to grow a very sustainable crop that could really help the industry with all of their aims and goals. Really interesting, back at the end of last year, there was something called the Agriculture Bill. It's still not an act of Parliament, but it's been discussed, it's had its second reading and so on. And core to the Agriculture Bill is this thing called public money for public goods, which rather than giving farmers more traditional money for simply growing and having land, etc., going forward, farmers are going to have to use basically good agricultural practices based upon sustainability. And when you start thinking about the benefits of cannabis, people talk about phytoremediation, etc., it gives a really good opportunity for that. So what would we like to see, basically? We're not a lobbying organisation, we're simply interested in development of the sector. But we think the cannabis grown in the UK could give us a real boost in terms of our agricultural development, build a lot of knowledge around it, really good trusted supply chains. And we'd really like to see the farmers having an easier time when they apply for industrial hemp licenses. I'm sure Hempen will give you some more insight into their challenges. We'd like to see flower cultivation in the UK with high CBD varieties, so we can have literally good homegrown crops. And we'd like to see much greater control on things like quality, sustainability practices, and a real ambition that the UK, over a period of time, could be the best producer of CBD and the whole plant across the whole world. And finally, really, you've seen these debates about what we call protected food names. So, cheddar cheese or pork pies and Melton Mowbray and that kind of thing. One of the things we often discuss, partly because of an influx of inquiries from East Anglia, is imagine you could have special grades of cannabis, either recreational CBD, Cambridgeshire cannabis, renowned around the world for excellent growing quality and so on. And that's one of our ambitions, to see a fantastic industry, all homegrown in the UK, and a great export crop after Brexit. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. My name is Patrick Gillett, and I'm from Hempen. We're a not-for-profit cooperative who farm and produce hemp and CBD products here in the UK. We set up in 2015, and we've been growing ourselves. We're fully vertically integrated from farm to fork since 2015, and we came into the news this summer because, unfortunately, midway through our growing season, after waiting 8 months for the response from the Home Office on the renewal of our hemp license, we were completely unexpectedly, and against what they had told us on the phone as well, we had our license revoked mid-season. So we had actually an incredible crop of 40 acres growing in the field, and we had to destroy that crop or risk a charge of cultivation of cannabis. That would have meant all future license applications would have been severely jeopardized, obviously criminal charges, reputational damage, and also James, whose farm it is, one of our members and directors, he's 60, and he frankly wasn't sure he could survive a cultivation of cannabis trial. So he said, look, we're going to have to destroy the crop. So we did that, and with a very heavy heart. We're a cooperative, and everyone in the cooperative is paid equally. We make decisions by consensus, and the heart of our business is the crop that we grow. It's the crop in the field. We work with it every day. It's a full lifestyle experience for us. And to destroy a completely healthy crop that was above our heads in places already in July, even at that early stage, was heartbreaking. But some of our backgrounds, and mine in particular, is in campaigning, and I knew this is an opportunity to highlight the ridiculous nature of the legislation and the regulation of hemp farming, hemp growing in this industry. Hemp, as we know, and as many people here today will discuss, is an incredible economic and ecological opportunity for the UK, and it's an incredible opportunity for farming in the context of Brexit. You know, this crop, in CBD alone, the UK market is projected to be worth 1 billion by 2025. All of that CBD will be going to farmers in other countries as the legislation stands. All of that money will be going to farmers in other countries. It will all be from imported CBD. Now that is ridiculous. That's absolutely ridiculous. It's as if our government is actually trying to hamstring British farmers and hamstring the emergent UK hemp industry and the UK CBD industry. So we've used the publicity and the platform we've been given, the injustice that's happened, and it isn't just happening to us, it's happening to lots of farmers, to say, we're using that platform to start a campaign called Save UK CBD. With that campaign, we're simply going to say, here's the research that shows what an incredible economic and ecological opportunity we've got here. Here's the amount of jobs, money, tax, and regeneration of rural communities and farming we can create, especially in a nervous post-Brexit framework. And here's an opportunity for us to actually lead the world. Because of Brexit, partly, we have an opportunity to lead the world. And we think that we can be successful. So we're currently taking the government to court about our case, and we hope that with our case, some of our lawyers think we can actually change the law for everyone. So please support Save UK CBD, and really good to be here with you all this weekend.
Thanks, Patrick. My name's Jamie Bartley from Unyte Hemp. We're cultivating 240 acres this year in Leicestershire, and one of the things we're undertaking there is a lot of research. We found there's quite a lack of accurate UK data when you really start looking into the yields for the different cultivars and how much fibre you get, how much shiv you get, and therefore how much end product you can actually produce. I mean, one of the biggest barriers I think we're currently facing here in the UK is the lack of large infrastructure to actually process the crop on a commercial scale. It is a very, very, very robust crop. I mean, anyone who hasn't seen hemp in a field, you can't break it when you try and snap it. It's such a high tensile strength, which is one of the many reasons that it's got so many beneficial properties and end-use products that we can actually derive from it. So really, one of our key goals is to look at establishing an industry and working with as many different farmers in agricultural sectors, but enable them to commercialise their crop by putting it through that processing line, making sure that it's of a large enough scale processing line that actually derives the value, then has the output materials at a low enough cost that we can then really take on some of the high carbon use end products such as petrochemical plastics. For us to really take that on with polylactic acid derived from hemp, we need to have a large scale of it. We manufactured 1.8 million tonnes of petrochemical plastic products in the UK last year. So we need a lot of hemp growing to be able to do that. But then when you start looking at the added environmental benefits that large scales of cultivation of hemp will give you, for instance, at the moment, in the agricultural sector, there's a lot of oilseed rape grown. That takes enormous amounts of pesticides, and those pesticides are going into our groundwater. Then the water boards spend enormous amounts of energy, capital, and in essence carbon to try and clean those up to UK drinking water standards to make it safe for us to drink. So just by replacing oilseed rape in a crop rotation with hemp, it completely eradicates that use of pesticides. Again, it will help eradicate blackgrass if that is growing just through one cultivation, because it will outperform many weeds in the field, certainly when it's grown for fibre at highest densities. So we're looking at lots of different densities. We've got 5 cultivars, 11 different densities, and really looking to then enable everyone else with that data as well, so they can maximise the commercial profit from the hemp.
There we go, I think. Yep, we're up. Fascinating panel we've got here. Does anybody have any questions? Anybody? Here we go.
Yeah, hi, Narinder Baines from Inuvo Limited. We're a supplier of crop growth enhancement products for traditional agriculture, so I'm very interested in the growth side of things. We've been doing trials in the UK on new products here. But my first question was to Rebekah. You say you're lobbying to open the UK CBD market. How is that lobbying going at the moment? What is the response at the moment from UK government and other bodies?
Okay, I want to make clear that we're not lobbying for the CBD market. We're lobbying for whole plant usage. So the aim is to look at hemp as an agricultural crop, so that it can be utilised, all parts of it can be utilised. At the moment, if you get a Home Office licence, you have to sign a declaration that you're going to destroy the leaf and the flower on farm, that you cannot use at all the leaf and the flower, and you can't cut it off and extract it somewhere else and bring it back. So it leaves basically the industry crippled, and so at the moment we're putting together with Hempen a strategy on how the best way to move forward, because the difficulty is in how the law is interpreted. So that's the problem is how it's interpreted and how it's being interpreted right now. So we can, all the CBD that you see here right here now in the Hempen CBD Expo, none of it comes from the UK. We can sell it, no problem, but we just can't extract it and utilize it and process it here. And what we want to show is that actually by doing that, you're crippling local community, farmers, and also a potential thriving market. So what we're doing is now we're putting together a campaign to see how the best way to put this message across to the government so that they can hear it in a way that then will hopefully be able to move it forward. I do think it's politically shrouded in with the CBD, medicinal side of the CBD, and I think that that's a big problem. But while it's allowed to be sold on the shops by countries that are allowing it to be extracted, Britain should have an opportunity, and communities should have an opportunity to be in the game as well here in the UK.
Are there any further questions? Yep.
Hi, it's probably a question for all of you. It's just a question around if you do hopefully manage to make the whole plant usable, is the kind of the laws and for example loft insulation, is there a whole change in like building regulations in order to fit with that as well? So you've got the whole structure along the way lined up.
Okay, the problem is that if you want to build it for insulation, you have to apply to the Home Office as a controlled substance. This is where the problem lies. So there are many applications for hemp. It's not just CBD. CBD is the flower and the leaf. But while you are having to go to a Home Office to apply for a Home Office license for a controlled substance, it really is crippling the industrial side of the hemp plant, which is hempcrete, hemp fiber, hemp plastics, graphene, all the other elements of the hemp plant. So what we want to do is to recognize the power of the whole hemp plant and bring it back into, as an agricultural plant, into DEFRA, so that we are not having to keep on going as a controlled substance. Because this is a problem, it's hard to get the license, and it's a really difficult issue for farmers who just want to grow hemp to have to apply for a Home Office license, have a DBS check, and all the other issues that come into that. So we need to have it recognized for what it is, which is an incredible industrial crop and also an environmental crop that is really being missed out in this discourse, because an environmental crop, it really ticks all the boxes for products into the future and under the Paris agreements that we've agreed to under the UK law.
I haven't got much to add to that, but I think the point is it's about value chains. So it's a bit, I mean, to use another agricultural analogy, it's a chicken and egg situation. And while you've got, I mean, often farmers will think, what's the point of going through all the effort and endeavour and risk to apply for a license and maybe getting rejected, and all the sourcing and challenges and upstream, the processing, or downstream, sorry, seed procurement and all those kind of things, and the agricultural knowledge about good practice and growing it. It's almost, in some cases, not worth the trouble for such a crop. And of course, the other side of that is kind of boom and bust. While we come to these events and particularly North American companies, are really interested in it. I think when you get down to the ground level, it's a very different picture, as the chaps here, of course, attested.
Again, I think the guys have covered the question really well there. The only thing I'd add is for any of the products you're looking at, you're still going to need to comply with the various regulations that any other product would be tested to. So, for instance, for the insulation products, we'll still need to have the fire certification in place. It will still therefore need to comply with the various different British standards as any other building product would. It will be exactly the same for anything that's hemp derived. We don't need to rewrite those standards. Those standards are in place for structural materials or for any other type of material. All we need to do is make sure the products that we're manufacturing from hemp can achieve those standards in testing.
Could the panel explain a bit more detail about why Unyte Hemp were successful and Hempen wasn't in acquiring a license?
Certainly, I mean, from our point of view, I mean, we were very focused on our end-use products. We've got 2 licenses in the UK. One of them's in Leicestershire, one's down in Oxfordshire. But I think dealing with the regulators, you need to be very concise with them. We understand the legislation. We know that CBD isn't an option. Unfortunately, I mean, it is frustrating both commercially and from the point of view that all of the products in this room, as Rebekah mentioned, they're all imported to the UK. So for the UK economy, it makes sense for us to be able to extract CBD. But currently we can't under the legislation. So being very clear from our point of view with our end uses and the processes that we were going to be putting the plant through to achieve those end uses.
Yeah, and just to add a bit more to that, we've obviously been licensed since 2015 in different capacities with different growers. The difference that happened this year is that on the farm, on our home farm, where we've held a license since 2016, the most recent license, the CBD market has kind of emerged in that time. And when it emerged, we wrote to the Home Office saying, on our annual grower statement, saying we are going to harvest the leaves and flowers for this purpose, and put it on our annual grower statement. There's literally a big box. It says, "Did you harvest the leaves and flowers?" And we put yes. What for? And we put what for. Now, we've put that every year since we started, and at no point did the Home Office ever say that that was a problem. Now, we understood from their guidance that is a very technical form of words that has changed over that period, and we understood that we were within that form of guidance, and we knew that we could not let flowers leave the farm. We could not sell flowers. Now, it was not clear that, in our opinion, and this is now going to be a matter for it's going to be legally tested in court, it was not clear that you couldn't extract a part of the flower and destroy the flowers on the farm with the earlier guidance. Now, they made it clear that that was not possible as of November the 1st, 2018, when they issued the latest guidance. So as of the November 2018, we knew we weren't going to be able to do that anymore, and we were in conversation with the Home Office. So just like Jamie, we didn't apply we didn't ask to extract for CBD with this license. They said, go for your seed and stalk, you're fine. And we said we're going to import our CBD from abroad. Like that's unfortunate reality. We're going to have to do that. That's the situation in which we were rejected our license. Our license was revoked. Now, one of the things they said is, because in the past, as you stated on your annual growers statement, you have harvested for leaves and flowers for CBD, we're not going to give you one in the future, even though you're not applying for that anymore, even though you've been open and upfront and honest, and even though we never once replied to you to say even a one-line email saying this is a problem. So this is now going to be a matter for court, and so I can't say too much more, but actually we believe that the guidance was unclear, the whole framework was a mess, the administration of it by the Drugs and Firearms Unit of the Home Office shows the mentality that the government was dealing with this. The Drugs and Firearms Units are used to dealing with applications relating to drugs, narcotics, and firearms, weapons. They're problems. We don't think that that's an appropriate way to deal with such an incredible opportunity for the UK. We think that DEFRA should be regulating it. DEFRA, who understand farmers, understand the opportunity that farming presents to the UK and the downstream opportunities that come after the farming as well. If the government switched the regulation over to DEFRA, that would show that it understands too the opportunity that this represents for UK farming and UK as a whole, and would seriously change the way this whole situation is being dealt with. Because when you're a drugs and firearms unit officer, you see everything as a problem. If everything's a problem, someone applies to you for a simple hemp license, you deal with it with a big hammer, and you stamp on it and you make sure that there's no more problem. That's the mentality we've got, and unfortunately it's because it's been dealt with by the wrong department. Let's move it to DEFRA. Let's have an evidence-based policy. Let's be able to, as Rebekah says, harvest the whole plant, including the lucrative flowers for CBD, and let's unleash this industry, because it's really, really exciting place to be right now.
Thank you. To add to that, actually, so ADAS were approached by a large farming organisation in East Anglia, and they wanted to do some crop trials. And part of their thinking was, is it possible to take either, maybe some good, do some good hemp seed oil, cold pressed hemp seed oil products, or even take the flowers and do some testing on locally produced CBD. And obviously we'd spoken to them about this and said there are challenges, but they were fairly ambitious in their targets, basically about diversifying and so on. And we set about supporting them, and actually we started to write to the Home Office on their behalf. Now, the interesting thing about ADAS is, for most of our background and history, we've been part of the Ministry of Agriculture. Of course, DEFRA as it now is. And we actually stated that very clearly. We said we're a research-based organisation. Our largest customers are people like DEFRA, Natural England, the water companies like we spoke about there with the pollutants and so on. And we said we've got a very good chance here being able to have a sensible conversation with them. And we found very quickly we got those similar responses whereby we're getting anonymous emails back, not really wanting to talk to us. We even then teamed up with Ferrer, for instance. We said we could do some testing with them. And Ferrer, of course, significantly owned by DEFRA, 75%. And none of this had any impact whatsoever on the conversation. It took us a bit by surprise, actually, basically, given, we have conversations with government all the time. And then it started to run out of steam. Sometimes the Home Office come back. A couple of weeks later, you've got a couple of days to respond. And for every time they came back, we give very logical, sensible answers based upon research, moving the knowledge forward, etc. And then one day, towards the end of Prime Minister May's period, they came back and just closed the file down. I think it's probably about the same time as yours, actually, wasn't it? Yeah. So it's very surprising to us, and actually very similar to Paddy. If we had a look at this from DEFRA, it might give a lot more impetus for British farming as well.
So, fascinating conversation. It sounds like there's an awful lot of work to do around education and really getting the right people behind this. But I agree. I think this is a fantastic opportunity for the farmers of the UK. It's a fantastic import or export, and it's ridiculous, absolutely ridiculous, that we're importing all of this finished product when it could be used here in a very vibrant market. I think we might have time for just one more quick question.
Thanks, John. Just going back to the industrial end there, you were talking about British standards. Has anyone thought of bringing out a hemp standard? Because the U values and R values are all created by corporates and industry. So if you bring out a H value and say you match this, then it changes the whole playing field.
Sure, I'll start with that one who's got the microphone, if that's all right. It's interesting, actually, because for me personally, before I came to ADAS, I was actually working for a certification business. And when we started having those conversations about creating a sustainable value chain, we said about putting really good standards in the marketplace. And I think one of the opportunities we do have, particularly in the UK, is to create some really interesting standards around that. There have been some quite interesting developments. So, for instance, there's something called the Global Cannabis Partnership. They've got various standards in place. You've got the Global Gap. They've started to look at cannabis crops, particularly in the US, and can that be part of the scope of certification as well? So we think actually, particularly when you combine it with good sustainability metrics and really understand the impacts of the plants in the ground and so on, there's a good opportunity there, again, to lead by example for the rest of the world, particularly use the great quality British standards we have. to set the world with the best benchmarks and standards on this as well?
Yes, certainly. I think there is a great opportunity here for us to do things better, to really draw in the beneficial elements from using hemp as a product, and then actually score them, if you like, as well. Make sure it's recorded. Make sure that is recognised as well. I mean, we're doing a lot of work with Cranfield University around soil carbon sequestration in soil, and really looking at trying to accurately model that data so we can use that to then move it forwards into the end use products as well. Because if you understand exactly what it's doing to the ground and what it's doing carbon wise, then you can really understand through your process how much carbon you do produce, and then equally, or CO2, and then equally the embedded carbon at the end product as well. So there's definitely a requirement for monitoring.
Yeah, I think there's various global manufacturing and agricultural international standards we can and should, and a lot of companies here are aspiring to. One of the travesties of the current situation is that the UK can't really contribute to that. We're going to have that imposed upon us from outside. We've been recently talking with AST, who regulate international standards, but as coming from America, but they've been really influential in getting involved with the North American cannabis market and setting the international standard for cannabis. In Europe and in the UK, we could be part of that conversation. As Colin says, we're respected world leaders in this kind of thing, but our respected academic researchers and academic institutions are not able to participate on that here in the UK. I'll give you an example. Our destroyed crop was the subject of 2 academic studies, and both those studies had to be, our part of it had to be scrapped. So whilst we've got a Home Office creating this level of uncertainty, researchers can't do anything. You know, I know this is Colin's business, but it's a nightmare.
One quick final word.
I'd just like to add one thing. I mean, all the money that's being made here is flowing right out of Britain right now and into North America and Europe. Wherever they've removed the barriers to growth, that's where the money is going to. And there is a definite need for a certification for a standard, but it's being really crippled here in the UK. There just isn't enough farmers, there isn't enough incentive for Britain to get even into the game at the moment. And what we're going to find is that in 4 to 5 years down the line, we're going to be absolutely flooded with imports from China, imports from India, imports from America, and imports from Canada. And Britain won't have an opportunity to even be in the game, because if we don't get in on the ship now as it's about to sail out, we're going to be so far behind we won't ever be able to catch up. So this is a real crucial time for the hemp industry in the UK to really remove those barriers, so that at least Britain has an opportunity to get a thriving industry, rather than in 5 years down the line we're just going to be flooded with imports and we will have missed this amazing opportunity to have a flourishing hemp industry that can both environmentally and industrially help and support Britain, especially through a post-Brexit economy.
Absolutely agree. I'd like to thank the panel. Unfortunately, we've run out of time. In fact, we've run a little bit over. But I'd like to thank the panel. Very, very good conversation. Thank you very much.